Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space and some fruity cards. Waffle Flower Crafts release for August just went live, and I am part of a blog hop to give inspiration and all the fun things. I will have all the info about that hop and all the links to the other fabulous makers in my blog post, which is linked directly below the video in the description box. And yeah, whole bunch of fun products, several fruit themed things, and they're fun. I had fun. I did some hot foiling and some die cutting, and one of my favorite things, which is Distress Oxide inks on Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, because I love how that looks. And yeah, just keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. My first step was to do the hot foiling, and I'm using the Waffle Flower fruity background hot foil plate. And I pulled out opaque white Glimmer hot foil from Spellbinders. I've used this in at least one other video. I can't remember. I know I've used it before. Normally, just my immediate reach when I do hot foiling is to go with gold, because you can't go wrong with gold. Gold is fabulous. And that's what I was going to do. But then I was like, ooh, I have this opaque white. I've used it before. I really liked the results I got with it. And I was like, ooh, the white on Neenah Desert Storm it's just gonna look fabulous. So that's what I went with. And like I've been doing for I don't even know how long now, I like to prep my cardstock by taping the foil to it. No, it just works for me. You know, I genuinely believe it helps me get better results. I think mostly because it probably does. I think it keeps, everything from shifting, because you've got the cardstock, the foil, the hot foil plate, the plates for the Glimmer hot foil machine, etc. So I also generally tape the actual foil plate to the cardstock as well. But since I'm using a full foil plate, I was like, no, not going to do that. Just doing it like I'm showing here. So I had put the plate on the machine face up while it was heating up, because full size plates like this, like the bigger ones, it does help to let them heat up a little bit longer. And once the solid green light was on that it was heated up, that's when I put the foil and cardstock onto it, press the timer button, let the timer go. It takes about a minute. And then had the two little shims that come with the Glimmer hot foil system, and then slowly ran that through my Platinum 6 machine. And then I removed the foil, and it's beautiful. And I really wish I could really show, maybe if you pause it, you can kind of see. Not only did it foil perfectly, but it depends sometimes, but a lot of times it does give almost like a letterpress effect. And with this one, it did happen. And it's like pressed into the cardstock, and it's subtle, but it's there, and I love it. So I repeated the process with the second piece, did the exact same thing, stuck the foil and cardstock on top of the plate, press the timer button, and then ran it through the machine. And I always run it through very slowly, and you don't run it back and forth, because again, things can shift and then you get stuff pressed in weird places and you don't end up with good results. So I just run it through very slowly, and then that's it. Simple. Love it. The results are great. And then off camera, I ran 2 more pieces of the Desert Storm cardstock through with, this is the Fruity Texture wafer die. So exact same pattern, but instead of hot foiling, it just does like a stitched pattern that pierces through the cardstock, which I was like, this is super fun. And if you don't like either of those, there is also a stamp set that has just all the individual little fruit pieces. I'll link to that. It's super cute. I had meant to use it, but I ran out of time. Anywho, to color these, I'm using the stencils, and I wasn't aware until I placed the stencil over the image that it's an abstract stencil. It's not shaped exactly to the images, which honestly, personally, I love. I love abstract, and I love things like odd little shapes are kind of going, or things like purposely going outside the lines. I love the look of that. It is something I struggle with. Like, you can do this with just coloring, you know, just kind of color instead of filling in the lines, kind of color and do an abstract shape. I struggle with that. So these stencils are awesome. It's a 3-layer set. I've talked about this before with a lot of Waffle Flowers layering stencils. They'll like label everything for you. And even with this set, the stencils are labeled. The one says yellows, one says greens, one says reds. I was like, thank you. Perfect. Not like it's fairly obvious, but still. I was like, I can use all the help I can get some days. And I'm also working on the big Waffle Flower grip mat. You guys have been, if you've been watching any of my recent videos, like I use this in like every single video pretty much. I am loving these. So much better than messing around with tape. Because you see, I just slap down the cardstock, slap down the stencil, do, and just keep repeating the process. So I used oxide inks, like I said. I will link to the specific colors. With the yellows, I'd started with a big blending brush, and then I switched to my smaller blending brushes because I was doing more than one color. So for the yellows, I did squeezed lemonade and mustard seed. For the greens, I'm using twisted citron and mowed lawn. And the other thing I was doing was with the hot foil panels. After I had stenciled over them, I was just taking one of my microfiber cloths and just gently rubbing it over because, of course, I'm using oxide inks, so they are sitting on top of all the foil areas. So I'm just kind of wiping away that excess. Some of that, especially once I get to the reds, it's going to basically like stain the foil. I don't care. It still looks great, but wiping away the excess just kind of cleans it up a bit, you know? And then with the panels that I had used, that fruity texture dye, there's nothing to wipe off because there's no foiling on it or anything. And yeah, again, these were just fun. Just the colors, the oxides on top of the Desert Storm, the little fruity shapes and the abstract, you know, nature of the stencils. I very much enjoyed making these. And even doing like 4 at a time. Using the grip mat, this portion came together way quicker than it normally does. Like, I've shown other methods I've done in the past when I'm stenciling multiple things and using layering stencils. This is by far my favorite way to do it now because it's just so much easier. So when I got to the reds, I used picked raspberry and candied apple. And same thing. Once I was done on the foil panels, I just took my microfiber cloth and I kept moving the cloth, like grabbing different little areas of the cloth to wipe because I didn't want to like smear ink everywhere, that sort of a thing. And then, yeah, stenciled the remaining 2 panels that I had done the fruity texture dye on. And then once that was done, all these backgrounds were complete. Like, so simple. So simple, so cute, so abstract, so fruity. The only thing I should have done differently is I probably should have just added some white splatter, specifically to the stitch ones. But like everything's already put together. You know, this is voiceover editing future me. So, yeah. If I could go back and change it, that's the only thing I would change. Is I would just add some splatter because, you know, you can't go wrong with that either. Anywho, I used the Oversized Sweet matching dies for my main sentiments for these cards, and just die cut a whole bunch of white cardstock with the word wafer dies, and then the outlines I die cut from vellum, and I stacked 2 of them together. That's what's going to go on top of the vellum for a bit of dimension. Normally I would do 3 because, you know, that's just a habit, a little bit of my OCD, that sort of a thing. However, when I'm using vellum outlines, what I've started doing in the last, I don't know how long, I put those ones on top, and then the remaining layer I'm going to put underneath because it's going to pop it up a little bit. So it's going to pop the vellum up from the card surface. So it just gives it that little extra bit of dimension. Plus it makes it easier to adhere because I've shown in a ton of videos over the years, like very carefully applying glue directly behind the words on the vellum, because if you're at all familiar, adhesive shows through vellum. It's annoying. So you got to find ways to hide it. So putting the word die cut on the back, it was easy to line up with the other ones because you can see through the vellum. And then when I go to adhere this to the card fronts, I just quickly stick the glue on the back of that word die cut, and I'm not touching the vellum at all, and life is good. So I got all my sentiments stacked, and then I took a little sentiment. There's the Oversized Sweet clear stamps. So it has that scripty word in a couple different sizes and then a whole bunch of little buildable phrases. And I decided to keep things simple because thank you cards are what I like use the most. So I turned all these into thank you cards. So I just used the "you are so" word or phrase to stamp, and I just stamped it onto all of these card fronts. Another thing I would have done, or you can do, is like white heat emboss it on black. That always looks fabulous, you know, and then trim it down. But I stamped these directly onto all of these backgrounds. And then, and I used VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then for the inside of the cards, I'm using the Fruit Sentiments clear stamps. And I chose the Thanks Very Much. Again, you guys know I love me some punny sentiments. And then I totally missed, there's another set too, the Fruity Pun set. I'm like kicking myself. I was like in the stack of all the new products and I totally missed it until I was done all these cards. And I was like, oh, that would have worked great too. Anyway, like I said, this is a good release. So I used that one, and I've shown this in a bunch of videos. I'm just using those same blending brushes, same oxide inks, and using the blending brushes to apply the ink to the stamp. And I just restamp it multiple times until I get a nice little blend and get the intensity that I want. And I'm doing this on the inside of the card, and I'll repeat this for all the card bases. My cards are all going to be top folding A2 white note cards. So I just kept inking up the sentiment with the blending brushes and the oxide inks, and then stamping it onto the inside of the cards till I was happy with it. And that finished off all the insides. And then to, like I said, adhere that sweet die cut sentiment, I just put the glue on the back of that little die cut word right on the cardstock, so it's not touching the vellum. And then I can adhere that to the background. And then once that's adhered into place, I'm just going to adhere all these panels directly to all of these card bases. And I had die cut all of these after I was done all the blending with the stencil. I die cut these with one of the Waffle Flower A2 rectangle wafer dies, one of the smaller ones, just to make it a little bit smaller so that the card base kind of frames it up real nice. And then as a final little touch of bling, I'm using some Trinity Stamps Pearly Gates confetti. So just subtle, but they give it a little shimmer, you know. And like I said, the only other thing I would have done was just add some white splatter. Still could have technically, but yeah, when I'm done, you know, making cards, I avoid doing things like that because that's the time that I'll end up getting like a huge blob and just messing everything up. So anywho, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I will have a link to my blog post. That'll be linked directly below the video. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I used below as well. And then in the blog post, it'll be all the pictures of the cards, picture links. And then in this case, there will also be links to all the other makers and all that info. So you can check that out below if you are interested. And as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos and for thumbs upping and commenting and letting the robot overlords know you guys like what you're seeing. Subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And yeah, I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.